Okay, so we just had a bit of a hiccup there, but we're going to start again. We tried to do it on live on YouTube. So we're going to do it through Facebook because that's where I normally do it and that's where I'm familiar. So we are recording live on Facebook, on my Facebook page, Fix Your Future. And we're live with Tracy Clemenson. I'm going to introduce you to Tracy in a moment. I do Heal with the Real podcast because I want to raise awareness of domestic abuse and the effect that it has on women. And so Heal with the Real is a podcast where I interview survivors to thrivers of domestic abuse, and we talk about ways to heal and the tools that we can use to heal past domestic abuse. And tonight's guest, I'm really fortunate to have such an inspiring lady. So Tracy Clementson is a domestic violence survivor. Her partner received a 5-year sentence after a sustained and violent attack against her in 2013. Following a subsequent mental health crisis, Tracy set up her own digital marketing agency, Arctic Bee, the company name representing survival in the face of adversity. And her message is that whatever you go through, you can come out the other side and not only survive, but thrive. So over to you, Tracy, just to say a little bit about your backstory and if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi. So, and thank you for the introduction. Yes, I mean, 2013, it seems like a long time ago now. It's relatively probably not that long ago, but it wasn't long after my mother died in 2009. And I think anybody who can identify with significant bereavement will know it leaves you in a very vulnerable state. And it took me a while really to come to terms with that and for that to hit me. So I was in quite a vulnerable state when I went into that relationship. The relationship that I was in, I will say that the violence escalated over time, and it was a very complicated situation. And one thing that I will say about my situation then was that I was a duty governor in a secure training centre for young people, which is like a prison for young people, and head of education. So I wasn't unemployed, I wasn't sitting at home, wasn't a weak person. I was very much height of my career thriving, in control at work. But there were things going on in the background that I wasn't telling people about. And over time, I think the manipulation by the individual got worse, to the point that 18 months into that relationship, I was starting to become quite isolated. It was a gradual isolation of alienating people around me, alienating my father. My father's passed away since, but alienating me from my father, alienating me from my children, from my friends, and just gradually cutting me off from everybody. And I remember it's very complicated because a lot of people said to me, a lot of people have said to me since, "Well, why didn't you leave? You obviously weren't a weak person. Why didn't you leave?" And he had 2 young children, and while I was with him, their mother died, and they came to live with us. So to say, "Why didn't you have to leave?" It's, in hindsight, yes, I should have done, especially the first time he struck me. So what would happen, there was a pattern, is that we would have an argument, he would panic and he would block the door and he would stop me from getting out. And there was one particular occasion where he actually held a hammer above me and threatened to smash the skull in. So, it was quite serious. There was a MARIC meeting, which is a multi-agency meeting to look for protection in place for me. The police were involved at certain points, and still I genuinely believed at the time, and that's partly, I think, from the psychological abuse and the certain amount of brainwashing and manipulation, that he was getting angry because he couldn't cope with the grief of the loss of his previous partner and suddenly having these children to look after, and those children needed me. So So rightly or wrongly, I stayed. And I got a job in another part of the country, and thought the distance would do us good. It actually made things worse. And on one particular occasion, when I came back down, still remember, 3rd of December 2013, I stayed there, and in the morning just woke up and sustained, I won't go into details, it was quite a violent and harrowing experience. So I was held hostage effectively for it was around about 9.5 hours.
Wow. Gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's the story of where I got to at that point. I did sustain some physical injuries. I still have a physical injury to my right hand, which you know, somebody said to me recently, when you shake hands, why don't you shake hands that firmly? You're not very assertive. And I had to say, actually, I can't, because it hurts. Please don't squeeze my hand when you shake it. It's been a very, very long process, and I was quite injured after that. It took me a while physically to recover, and it took me a while mentally to recover. And there was a court case afterwards, so I was placed straight on remand. There was a court case afterwards, which was pretty awful. Actually, in some ways, I think the court case was actually worse than violence. You know, it's an awful thing to go through, to have people there judging you. So that was really difficult. But that's my backstory. That's what happened. And there was one point during that attack where I actually blacked out, and I genuinely thought, what went through my head was, this is it, where my life ends. This is it. I really genuinely thought that. He had his hands on my throat, and I just remember the sounds going, and then the black, and just thinking, this is it. I'm not going to see my children again, not going to see my dad again. And actually, I do think back to that point quite often, because I'm still here. And
are you grateful? I guess, gosh, there must be so many thoughts going through your head around all that. Just something that I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things that you mentioned right at the beginning. You said he was very lovey-dovey to you. Was that how was he? Did he love bomb you in the beginning, or?
No, I don't think so. I wouldn't have said a classic love bomb. I don't think that the warning signs were there initially. The big change did come around the point that his ex-partner died, and that's really when things started to spiral out of control. And you know, I think he did find it very hard to cope with, but it didn't justify the way that he treated me. And I found out subsequently, following the court case, that he actually had a history of violence.
Wow. Okay.
So you know, there were little things, there were little bits of coercion, there were little bits of again, hindsight's a great thing. So there were little bits of maybe little warning signs, but there was nothing physical before that point. And he hadn't held me against my will before that point, but there was just this little bit of paranoia when there were other men around, and questioning things, and getting angry and shouting over things that, you know, so there were warning signs looking back on it. And I think unless you've been through this, it might be difficult to explain that to somebody else, because a lot of people would be like, oh, why didn't you just get up and go?
Yeah. But, and that is a classic. That was another point that I wanted to kind of bring up, because you mentioned people going, well, why didn't you just leave? Well, you know, for anybody that's in an abusive relationship will understand that that question is a really bad question to ask somebody that's going through domestic abuse. But secondly, you know, sometimes there's so many situations around the abuse of why the victim can't leave. You know, that it could be the victims got no money because, you know, the abuser's controlling the finances. It could be that you know, you trauma bonded to this individual, and you're in this perpetual cycle of where, you know, they're love bombing you, they're nice 1 minute, and then you're clinging on to that hope that they're going to be nice again, but it's going through this cycle of you know, love bombing, then abuse, and then, you know, it's just continuous, isn't it? And you end up clinging on to that hope that they're going to be all right again.
I think also there's a certain amount of denial, and I would say this to anybody who listens to this who might be in an abusive relationship now, and this is one thing that I need to be really clear about, is that you are never going to change that person. And I was under the illusion that somehow I was going to be the one that was going to, that I was going to be able to change him, I was going to be able to sort him out, that if he got help. And actually, at one point, I got him to go to the St Giles's Trust. Now, if you know that they do work with domestic violence abusers. And
sorry, 1 minute, Tracy. I'm really sorry. My dog's scratching and I can hear it, and I don't want it to be over the recording. Right, let's let him in. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Scratching at the door.
Yeah, and I remember him going, for his first session. And when he came back, I said, well, how did it go? And he said to me, they made me realise that you're the problem. They said there was this pyramid and that he had to work out what made him escalate to get to that top of the pyramid in terms of anger. But he actually turned it around. And now, again, and looking back on it, I can see that that's probably not what they said. But what he'd done is he'd interpreted it in such a way that you're the problem.
And that's the thing, isn't it? That's the gaslighting, you know, the blame that they, you know, project the blame onto the victim. And actually then the victim kind of then second guesses whether they're right or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a gradual process. I say it's a gradual process. It can happen reasonably quickly in timescale, because you're talking a relationship that lasted 18 months. So this wasn't 20 years. And do you know what? I've got a really good friend called Kathy. And when so what happened was when the attack first happened, the attack that led to him getting a prison sentence, my hand actually fell on a cup, and the force of my hand basically went like that on the cup and caused soft tissue damage. So I couldn't use my hand. My right hand was completely out of action, and I had to have ultrasound therapy to get it working again. And I remember sitting in the waiting room and talking to a woman there who's become a very good friend of mine called Kathy, and she'd been in a marriage. She actually had her wrist in plaster cast. Her husband had broken it, and she'd been in a relationship. She'd been married over 20 years. So when you put things in perspective, you know, whatever you've been through, it was a very, very short period of time for me. So I always think that you have to look at things in context and see things as to the experiences that you've been through, is to use them to learn from them, use them to pass them on to other people, and always remember there are people worse off than you, and there are people still going through this now. And as women, we actually have a huge responsibility as well. We have a massive responsibility to support other women, because one thing that I found out from this experience was actually my biggest critics were other women.
Yeah.
And some of my friends, some of my closest friends, actually posted things on social media about me.
Wow.
You know, that it was my fault, that I'd wound him up, that I'd asked for it. I remember talking to another friend of mine who turned around and said, you need to really think about what you did to wind him up that much.
Wow. And that's there because they don't know the story. They don't know the story, and they're just coming from their perspective of the little bit that they clearly don't really know.
Yeah.
And I think things like people like that, you just have to, you can't change what they're feeling or their thoughts are. You have to let it go, just because I think that's the only way that you can move forward, isn't it? Or
yeah,
you know, let them go as like your friendship circle, because like you say, you've learned that lesson, you know, you've learned, and that's the thing, is learning that lesson of who are
yeah,
your, you know, who are your network of support, you know, your real true friends, because your real true friends will always be around forever if they're your, you know, your true.
yeah. Yeah, and I've got some really, really good friends that have stuck by me, you know. Angelo and Mandy, who I've known since I was young, since I was at school, you know, they were there for me all the way. And you're right. I mean, at a time like that, you really do learn who your friends are, and you really learn quite quickly. And they continue to be supportive to this day. You know, I'm really, really grateful for them being in my life, and yeah, but I do think that's really important. I think women need to learn to support one another.
Definitely, and hold each other up, you know. We're not here to be unkind. I always, my motto is, if you've got nothing kind to say, don't say it. Just don't say it, you know.
Yeah.
And I say that to loads of people, you know, especially my kids. If you've got nothing kind to say, don't say it, you know. Kindness doesn't cost a thing, does it?
Yeah, and don't judge anyone else, because unless you're in that situation, and unless you've been through this, you can't possibly know what it's like to be mind controlled to that extent. I mean, you have to go through a lot of manipulation to get to the point where, when somebody's violent to you, don't walk away. I mean, any ordinary person in the street, if somebody came up and punched you, the first thing you do is fight back or run, right?
Yeah.
So why would you put up with that in a relationship? The simple answer is because you've been manipulated mentally and emotionally to the point that you don't feel like you can fight or run away. So you know,
it's that freeze thing, isn't it? You know, freeze, flight, or fight. And it's definitely a freeze thing. It's just like, right, you know, I think you're right, definitely. So Tracy, talk us through, after, you know, you've got away, what's your road like to recovery? How did you try and recover? I mean, I don't think personally you never recover, but you learn how to deal with it in a different way.
Well, actually, so what I went through, I don't know if have you ever seen the film The Shining?
I have, yeah, but do you know, I can't remember what it goes like.
Yeah,
the guy with the big knife.
That's right. Yeah. I should just say, when I said I was held at 9.5 hours, I was held at knife point, and he threatened to stab me. So, the reason he got 5 years was the threatening to kill, false imprisonment, and actual bodily harm. So, you know, there was another charge that he was found not guilty of, which actually is harder to come to terms with than what happened. What happened to me? I was really physically injured. The physical recovery took quite some time. I would say at least 3 months before I could breathe without it hurting, and before I kind of got the use of my hand back. Saying that, do you know, I actually went back to work quite quickly.
Wow.
I remember walking in, I had to get people to unlock because I couldn't use my hand, and I didn't stay there for very long before there was a Christmas break, and I was off again where I could recover, and I was like, thank goodness. And you know, I did it because I was so determined. I thought he'd spent ages trying to get me to give up work. That's what he wanted. He wanted me to be a housewife and a mother to his children. He didn't want me going out having a career. And that's part of it as well, actually, is I think sometimes with men that are abusive, they kind of feel like they don't want you to have a career. They feel intimidated. They want to feel more powerful than you.
Yeah.
So it's about stripping you down. So I was determined. So I actually went back to work, and I you know, I still have black eyes and whatever, and I just thought, you know what, I'm going to go and do it. And I remember my boss looking at me horrified, thinking, you might frighten the children, because they're only like between 11 and 18. So I kind of sat in the office for a few days and then went home and rested. So the physical side of things took about that long. Psychologically, I was angry for a long time, more than anything, until the court case. And it's actually the court case that broke me. Yeah.
And how have you been since the court case then? Have you been able to, are you able to let it go, do you think? Have you got to that point?
I don't think I will ever understand the verdict of the jury. Like, I will never understand. I mean, I'm not going to go into detail, but there was sexual violence involved, and that was the bit he was found not guilty of. And I will never understand it. I mean, there was physical evidence of injuries, clumps in my hair all over the house that had been pulled out my scalp. You know, bruises, knife cuts. There was significant evidence. So I will never ever understand that, and I don't think I will ever truly accept that. It took me a long time to really get to the point where I thought, you know what, it's time for me to move on from this now, because how can I say it? Immediately after the court case, I couldn't even go outside. I didn't speak to anyone for about 6 weeks. I couldn't get my words out. My mouth open, nothing came out. I was paranoid. And if I did venture just outside, you know, I'd just go down to the front, stepping outside. I was paranoid in case there was a member of the jury there that would see me. You know, I didn't want anyone to see me. I was just hiding away. That was a tough bit for me. The court case, the legal process, and you know, that was 2013, but I'm not sure things have moved on that much. You know, you don't have rights. You are a witness. Yeah, there's no such thing as you having your own barrister. It's not your barrister against theirs. You're just a witness. You have no right of appeal, but they do. You have no way of knowing why the jury came to the decision they did. So the court case was really tough. And that's the bit I think that took the time. The actual physical side of things, as I say, and the coercion, I've always been a bit rebellious, and I've always just been really determined that I'm not going to let it, you know, I'm not going to let it hold me back and stop me from living my life. I wrote within a year of it happening, I started writing a novel. I've completed it. I haven't got around to getting it published, but I've completed it. And that was really cathartic. That was a really good exercise to get it all out on paper. And it's fictionalized. It's not my story per se, but it's based on what I went through. Yeah. So that was really good. And there's other things that have happened since. My father had died within a year of the court case. Had a heart attack, and one of the hard things was finding a letter from him saying, you know, he'd actually found it really traumatic, the whole thing. That was tough, and that knocked me back quite a bit. You know, I was very close to my dad. But I've moved away, and I had a real mental health breakdown in 2019. I think that's where it really all came to a head. I think everything, there was stuff happening at work. I had my foot broken at work because I was assaulted by a student, and everything just came crashing down. And at that point, as strong as I tried to be, I think the dam broke, and I ended up in hospital, and I ended up really depressed and really ill. And I had 6 months of trying to pull myself out of it. And I remember just not even being able to get out of bed in the morning, walking into the doctor after 10 days, and the doctor saying to me, wow, you know, you've got changed, and me saying, no, I've changed my cardigan, and her saying, that's progress. You know, I was that sick. And I think that all those things that have happened just really came to that point where maybe, as much as I've done the writing, And actually it was around the time that I finished writing it, I actually put the cap off about the violence to the end, and I finished writing it and I crashed. And pandemic happened and we went into lockdown, and I'm probably one of the few people to say this. I actually think that saved my life. I actually think that was the one thing that made such a difference, because I knew my career in education was over. I had to take a step back and I had to think to myself, do you know what? You're either going to sink or you're going to pull yourself out of this and you're going to turn your life around. And so I set out to be up.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd had the domain name for a little while, because of the symbolism. The Arctic bee is quite an incredible creature, you know, it lives in very cold climates, and it quite inhospitable climates, and survives against the odds. So I'd had the domain name for a while. I started off by just contacting people that I knew from my past, people that I'd worked with in the past, and said, look, you know, I knew how to build websites. I've done it on and off part-time for years. I'm going to set my own company up, Arctic Bee. Do you know anybody who needs a website? Do you know anyone that can help me? I had the space during pandemic to do that. You know, the whole world stopped, so it's fine that I was on my own. It didn't really matter. It just kind of felt like everybody's in the same situation. And so bit by bit, I built my strength up. And now I am, so that was in April 2020. So we're now just over 2 years on. I've got 2 direct employees and contractors, and we are a team of 10 in total, so we're doing quite well.
Wow, you see, that is incredible. You know, that is just incredible, and you just need to give yourself a bloody big pat on the back, because to come from in such a place that you were at, and I know we've had that conversation before, you know, when we've chatted before of how difficult, you know, the court case was for you, to then to write your book. Can we just go back to where you said about you wrote your book and then you crashed?
Yeah.
Me, I did exactly the same thing, and it was the most cathartic thing I could ever have done. And when I was in the narcissistic relationship in lockdown, that was when I wrote, you know, Fix Your Future, and that was my memoir, and that just came flooding out, you know, like you said, you couldn't stop, and it just came out and came out. And for me, it was just like this page dump there, just got everything out and understood why I'm an empath, clearly, because I'm wanting to fix people, you know, like yourself, you know, you wanted to fix your abuser, but we can't, like you say. And yeah, when you went through that moment, you just finished your book and you crashed, how did you get yourself out of that then? How did you really move forward, or, you know, to get to where you are with Arctic Bee now today? How did you is there something that you do in your daily routine, or you know, is it any tools?
Yeah, I mean, there were a mixture of things. I will say there were a mixture of things that led to me getting to that point mentally. The book, just going back to the book, I wrote all of it within a year, like you know, around the year mark of the court case. That was my way of dealing with it. And I kind of parked it up because I had this final chapter to write, and I didn't write the final chapter until the beginning of 2019. And having had my foot broken as well and starting to get flashbacks, I was in a very stressful job. You know, I will say as well, before we came out of prison, I moved away. I cut all my friends off, apart from the few that I've spoken about, and I moved away. I moved to another part of the country, and so I was very isolated. So there's a whole mixture of stuff that led to me getting to that point. And it was just one night I just thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to wake up tomorrow. And that's how I ended up in hospital, extremely ill. Spent 3 days in hospital. And then I had that dark period of about 6 months where I was just sleeping all the time. I could barely get out of bed. Yeah, I just totally crashed. And in terms of how I got out of it, I didn't have a particularly supportive doctor. I had a friend in London, and there was a postcode lottery of healthcare, definitely is, and I knew I wasn't getting the help I needed up here. So in February 2020, before the lockdown happened, I actually asked him if I could go and stay with him. Went down to London and registered with a doctor at the end of the street, and spent a month down there. Registered with a doctor in London, and that GP practice was amazing. Such a contrast. I walked into that practice and I walked up to that desk and I said, need to register. I'm living here, and I was only there for a short period of time. And I think I'm going to hurt myself. And I had a doctor out, and I was in that room within minutes. She spent an hour with me, and I got all the medical care that I needed. I had people come to the house, and was put in touch with refuge, and my medication was reviewed to, at least get my mood to a level period. And by the end of that month, I actually felt like a different person. I actually felt like, I maybe I can start to think about moving forward beyond this. So come the lockdown, now if my memory serves me right, I think that was towards the end of March. So when that lockdown happened, the isolation and loneliness I felt suddenly didn't matter anymore, because the whole world stopped. That to me was a positive thing, and it gave me the opportunity to really step back and focus on myself, and really think to myself, look, my career in education, there's no way I'm going back to that now. If you've had a mental health problem and any educational establishment knows about it, they're not gonna take you on. You're dealing with young people. You can understand that. As much as they might have mental health policies, it's a career killer, especially in senior management. So I knew that I had to do something. I knew that I had to dig deep inside and use my resilience and use everything I had. And the one skill set I had was web design. I'd kept a portfolio of part-time clients for years. I've been building websites for over 20 years, and I've kind of done it as a bit of a hobby, if anything, on the side. So I really pulled deep on that, and I thought, you know what, I'm really going to take it slowly, day by day. I set myself daily goals. So I'd get up, and one day might be, do you know what, today I'm going to cook myself a meal. I'm a terrible cook, by the way. They don't want me to cook you a meal, but I'll try. So today I'm going to cook myself a meal, and then the next day it might be I'm going to go through my wardrobe and I'm going to sort some clothes out for charity. And then the next day it would be, right, I'm going to go online now and I'm going to contact 5 people and I'm going to ask them if they know anyone that wants a website, from my friends or social media. And then it would gradually build up, right, I'm going to build a website. So setting those daily goals was really important, and just living those quick wins and knowing, right, okay, you've done really well today. That's great. And I took it day by day. Really did.
Amazing. Amazing. Do you do any work with your inner healing? Because for me that was a major importance. That was the start of my journey, a self-love journey, because I really didn't love myself. And it was that where you look in the mirror and it's you don't like what you see. And so for me, self-love was really important, being able to look in the mirror and actually high-five myself or smile at myself, and think, actually, you're all right, that was hard. So self-love was really important for me on my healing journey. Is there anything that you particularly do in your inner healing?
If I'm really honest, not as much as maybe I should do. I can be quite self-critical now, and I still have moments where I think when you, like you said right at the beginning when we first started talking, you never truly get over it, and there's always that little bit of doubt that pulls you back. I think when you've been in an abusive relationship, you carry scars. You can't, emotional scars and physical scars in some cases. You can't fully ever say, I'm 100%. I mean, there are times where I walk in my house at night and I'm holding my breath, just, oh my gosh, is he here? has he found out where I am? You know, that kind of stuff. So it never fully 100%. But what I do is I'm very good at looking at problems in context. I'm very good at saying, right, okay, I'm going for a tough time right now. And maybe this is a tough day or a tough few weeks or a tough few months, but I know that, you know, I'm very positive there's going to be something ahead. I surround myself with my friends. I've made some really good new friends where I've moved to. You know, I'm a very social person, and I take time out. You know, I take time out and I'll binge on Netflix, or you just have a bath and just look after myself and just really take time out and care for myself. And I think that's really important, because you have to rely on yourself.
Well, yeah, you can't rely on, that's the thing, you can't change anything else except for yourself. And that was a big learn. You know, I think you mentioned it earlier, you know, we want to change everybody else, don't we? And actually we can't. So for me, that was a huge learning curve, that actually just change yourself, nobody else. You know, that's the only thing you can control. So that was important learning for me.
Yeah, and I think my business is really like my real focus now. You know, my children have left home. As I said, my parents have gone, and so really it's just me, and my business is everything. And I've got young people that are working for me, so I feel really responsible for them as well, and their welfare and their well-being. And you know, so my business is a real focus and a passion of mine. And you know, thank goodness, can I just say, thank goodness I did end up that sick. Because if I hadn't, I'd probably still be, you know, tearing my hair out in education in quite an unfulfilling role. And now I kind of feel like, you know, it doesn't matter if it's not about money, it's not about earnings, it's actually about the fact that I'm carving my own way out. You know, I'm making my own future. I'm in charge of my own future totally, and that's really empowering. That's a really good thing. As well, I mean, I put a blog post out on Mental Health Day. I think you might have seen it.
Yes, I did.
That was actually entitled "I'm Not Okay." And I've had a lot of people message me and say, you know, I'm here if you want to talk to me, which is wonderful. You know, it's lovely to know there are people out there, because my business has been tough in the last, probably about 3 weeks. You know, it's been a bit of a rocky period, as all small businesses are when they start out. And for me, it's actually important not to walk around with, the whole point of doing that was to say, you don't have to walk around upbeat all the time. You don't have to go out and be the 100% positive, buzzing person because you're the person that got over domestic violence and you're inspiring other people. It's actually okay sometimes to say, do you know what? I'm having a bit of a tough day today. I'm having a bit of a tough time. And the more people do that, and the more that becomes natural, and the more that becomes okay, not to say that we want to whinge endlessly, but the more people can do that and say, do you know what? It's not all gloss and it's not all perfect. And social media has a lot to answer for in this respect, as much as I work in the industry.
Absolutely,
is that not everybody else's life is perfect. You know, let's go back to the fact that women should support one another, and let's really support one another, and let's be open with one another and say, do you know what? Today I'm not okay, and then. But I know I'm going to be okay. I know I'm going to be okay in the long run. But actually, I'm having a bit of a tough time at the moment. Is there somebody out there that can maybe give me a bit of support or a bit of help?
Yeah, and it goes like that, doesn't it? In peaks and troughs.
Yeah.
You know, and one week you could be having a really bad week, and then the next week it's like, well, what was all that about? This week it's amazing, you know.
Yeah.
So that's just life, isn't it? And talking about how women support each other, you are going to be one of the amazing speakers at the Survivative Thriver Summit on the 19th of October. So we are running a summit in Clubhouse. So Clubhouse is an audio app that's free to download, and anybody can join it. And we are in the club called Inspire-Nation. And in the club there, we're going to have, I think it's around about 19 speakers in total coming to the summit. All have had different experiences of domestic or narcissistic abuse, and they're here to lift the tale. And some have gone on to support other women, you know, through mindset and, you know, supporting them to heal. And that is particularly what I do. I support women, what we've already spoken about, you know, writing to heal, because writing and healing has some amazing benefits. So yeah, we've got the summit coming up 3 p.m. till 8 p.m. on Inspire Nation, and on, I think, let me get this right, 10 a.m. till 3 p.m. EST. And yeah, so do come along if you want some tools on, or you may be going through an abusive relationship at the moment and you just want some ideas of what to do, or some tools that we may talk about that could help you to heal. Thank you, Tracy, so much for being on this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure. You've just been so honest and open, and you know, we're all here to hold each other up together, and I, you know, I just can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast Heal with the Real, and coming to the summit to speak about your experiences to support other women's growth. You know, that's what it's about, isn't it?
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me as well. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to the summit as well. So
it's going to be an incredible event, you know, and there's going to be so many gems that the women are going to be talking about, ways to heal, you know, so don't miss it. So thank you once again, Tracy, and thank you everybody for listening. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.